Welcome, everyone. The doors are closing, so the session is going to begin. I'm David Wormold. I'm from MarkLogic. We have the pleasure of sponsoring this track today, and I also have the pleasure, therefore, of introducing the speakers. And our next speaker is Paul Selway. Paul is a Salesforce.com functional architect with over 6 years of Salesforce.com Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and Custom Cloud implementation experience. His leadership skills have been honed by over 25 years, doesn't look old enough for that, of solving complex business strategy challenges by leveraging technology, with a focus on solving marketing, sales, and customer service pain points with Salesforce.com CRM. He also has solid functional solution architecture, business systems analysis, and business process mapping skills, and adding a Henley MBA business qualifications to his technical and international expertise makes Paul a valuable asset for business leaders looking to leverage the cloud. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, David, and thank you, everyone, for coming. At the back, we see Mark. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about SaaS. And that's not being sassy, that's SaaS, software as a service. And whether it really is a source of cost reduction or maybe a source of strategic advantage, or both, maybe. So without further ado, how many of you in this room would identify yourself as an architect? Raise your hands. Everyone. We've got 2 people that are not architects, and I suspect they are, but they don't know. One of the things an architect is responsible for is connecting the business to the technology capabilities. You might be responsible for infrastructure, network management. Maybe you're responsible for a data center, or responsible for databases, or Web 2.0, or programming. How many of you are in infrastructure? You feeling threatened by the cloud there? No? You are? Yeah, so we've got one person that's not, one is. Good. And how many of you would say you're in the cloud? One? Marina's not sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. If you are the cloud? Sorry? Does it count if you are the cloud? It does definitely count. So one of the things I've struggled with as an individual is, what is an architect? An architect, and I doubt we ever will all agree, a business architect. How's that different from a solution architect, technical architect, data architect, enterprise architect? I think. How many other architect names are you aware of? Right. So quality architect, cloud architect. Yeah. I think mostly we're magicians. And the tricks we pull off is taking complex business problems, tuning them, distilling them, and then enabling solutions with technology. I think that's what we do. I think we're magicians, and you should congratulate yourself, because it's pretty tough to talk business speak and technology speak at the same time. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about SaaS, software as a service, and I'm going to be focusing on the public multi-tenancy SaaS clouds. But before I do that, I want you to come away from this talk understanding that it's not an all-or-nothing strategy. You don't have to go 100% in the cloud, and you don't have to say 0% in the cloud. And typically, I've seen a lot of movement to the cloud in non-business critical functions, what I call edge applications, where maybe you've moved HR into the cloud. Maybe you've moved email and document collaboration into the cloud. Or you've moved marketing into the cloud. And then maybe you move your sales, CRM, into the cloud, and your customer support call centers into the cloud. And what I'm seeing is, if it's not a source of competitive advantage, and if any of you sat in a previous talk by Dr. Don, what you have seen is a lot of people have put in those applications and capabilities into the cloud that are relatively safe to do so. But now I think with the new capabilities that you can get with cloud, SaaS integration platforms, you're beginning to see the ERP type capabilities moving into the cloud. So as you're doing your career, you may want to be aware of the cloud. It's displacing and disintermediating a lot of the older skill sets. So here you are, an architect. You've got SaaS in your hand. Where are you going to put it? Why would you want to use software as a service? Are you doing it simply to keep costs under control? Because the capital costs of firing up a SaaS solution are relatively minor. The operational expenses are not. So you might end up playing a budget game. How many of you have asked for a capital budget in the last year? Put your hand up. Is it a fun conversation? No. Is it a fixed amount? Mostly. And how many of you have asked for operational expenses? Bit easier to get? One-off? Sure, let's do it if it's only going to cost us this much. So some of the benefits when you talk about cost is it a capital cost or is it an operational expense? So probably a good idea to pause a bit and say, what is SaaS? And I'll tell you what I think it is. It's software that's owned, delivered, and managed remotely by one or more providers. It's based on a common set of code and data definitions that can be further tailored to your needs. It's consumed on a one-to-many model to all contracted customers. Some examples of that: Google for work, Google Apps for Work. Another example for that, NetSuite, Workday, Salesforce.com, where you start with a core set of capabilities and then tailor from there. But the underlying core code is a common set of code. You tend to pay for use. So it's more of a metered cost. You're not buying a perpetual license. Each month or each year, you have to pay a fee to continue to use it. If you want to use more, you pay more, you get a price break. Typically, the end of the year is a good time to negotiate those particular things. If you want to play less, you can shrink down as well. But the SaaS I'm talking about is multi-tenancy public cloud, where every organization is in the same cloud and they're separated by the security model. They're almost like a tenant in a high-rise building, sharing the electricity, the heat, and the infrastructure. And it's kind of a scary thing for a lot of people who I would say are server huggers. They like their servers. They hug them, they pat them down before they go home, and they like to touch their hardware. And I must admit, I was one of them once. I used to love data centers. It was all full of these nice little hardware servers. And now my company doesn't have any servers, any desktops, doesn't own any device. It's a bring your own device. And we can scale and shrink at will. And we can operate from anywhere on the planet with an internet connection. Slightly different scenario. So we have talked about some common SaaS vendors, but some of the applications we're seeing is marketing automation. Pardot, ExactTarget, Eloquia, Marketo, HubSpot, the Salesforce.com Marketing Cloud, How many of you in your organizations use marketing automation or know what it is? We've got 4 of you and someone buzzing. That's great. So maybe that's 5 of you. How many of you get emails that seem very personalized to yourself? Yeah, all the time? You know, dear Heather, how do they know me? This is marketing automation when they're starting to do some mass personalization based on knowledge they have of you. Maybe they've looked at Heather's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or some other place that she doesn't want them to look. But as we move forward, you're seeing a huge push at the moment into what's known as CRM. Does anyone know what CRM stands for? Customer Relationship Management. Yeah, actually, I think it stands for can't remember much. You talk to every sales rep, and that's what it is. They can't manage a list more than 7 things long, and so they use CRM. There's a lot of cloud-based CRMs out there. Salesforce.com, has anyone heard of that? That's good. Sugar CRM, more the medium to small business, and Zoho, more the small business. Call centers, what's the number 1 call center software out there? Salesforce.com. Didn't know that myself until yesterday. But you've got Zendesk out there, Desk.com, which is a packaged version of Salesforce's Service Cloud. Office applications. How many of you get a strategic advantage for hosting and managing your own email? No one's put their hand up. Why in earth are you doing it? There's Office 365 out there. There's Google Apps for Work. As we're seeing, a lot of these are becoming commoditized, and they're simply cheaper to let someone else do it. ERP systems in the cloud. We've got Workday, NetSuite. We're seeing Salesforce enter that ERP market now with financial systems, inventory management, manufacturing systems, HR systems. Document management. How many of you still have a drive, a local server drive that you dump documents on? How many use SharePoint? That's a bit more popular. Does anyone use Dropbox? Oh, more hands. Google Drive? Oh, there's people using Google Drive. And there's a bunch of others, Box.net, and it goes on. How many of you get a strategic advantage from hosting and managing your own documents in-house? It's not a core business function, is it? It's like keeping the electricity on for the lights. And what we're seeing now is more and more development platforms coming out in the cloud, SaaS development platforms. There's the Google engine. If anyone's using Chrome and look at the amount of apps available to you now, it's pretty impressive. Gone are the days when I photocopy my expenses, I take a picture of it, it saves it in Expensify, Expensify sends it to my accounting system, and money magically appears in my bank account, which is kind of cool. And then you're starting to see more social communities firing up, where you're starting to be able to share corporate data in a secure or unsecure way with your customers, your employees, and your partners. So you're bringing your business processes closer to the people that matter. It's kind of hard to bring a mainframe close to a customer or a partner. But as you start to go to the cloud, those systems of engagement become more meaningful. And then you're seeing a lot of the finance systems now moving to the cloud. Financial Force, QuickBooks Online, where you don't even have a server in-house running your finances. It's out there in the cloud. Does that make you scared? Is anyone nervous of that stuff in the cloud? I've got some nodding heads, yeah. Well, actually, if you look at all the data breaches recently, they've been with data systems that are not in the cloud. We've got the Target, the Home Depot. I'm sure there's others. There's the ones that come up immediately. So let's go to what I was talking about. Does the cloud reduce cost? What are those drivers? Well, I've talked a little bit earlier about capital expense and operating expense, but no matter what accounting bucket you put it in, the chances are that cloud and building it yourself probably have a similar cost footprint if you take everything into account, especially as you move up the value chain to some more complex cloud applications. But some of the other things is it's flexible. When you build an in-house system, and I've done it many times, you have to build for peak load. If you don't build for peak load, what happens? When peak load occurs, your capability disappears. And so consequently, you've got a lot of hardware, software, firmware, technicians, infrastructure people, babying a system that's probably running at 5 to 20% of capability at any one point in time, knowing that it has to work at 100% of capability at some point. The other things, business continuity planning. With cloud-based systems, you can lose your entire factory or office building, move into another one, bring some basic technology, and fire up again. And a lot of these cloud providers have multiple data centers, and they give you that redundancy. A little bit of interesting information. A business that's destroyed by a tornado or a catastrophic event, on average, 40% of them go out of business within the first 6 months. Who likes to build for redundancy and disaster recovery? No one. It's an expense, isn't it? And then you don't really know if it's going to work until you actually have that disaster. The other thing is painless upgrades. A lot of cloud-based systems upgrade themselves. They upgrade for all the users, and they do it in a small window of time. Has anyone here upgraded from, say, Microsoft 2010 to Microsoft 2013? Has anyone done an email system upgrade? How long did it take? Was it 10 minutes? Months. A lot of cloud-based systems can upgrade 140,000 customers in less than an hour. So that maintenance is actually a cost reduction driver. And then risk containment. How many of you have been approached by the business to say, hey, I want to get into this new market. Can you set up my sales, my marketing, my delivery, my customer service? And I need to get to market in 8 weeks. And you're sitting there going, it takes me that long to get the servers in-house and commissioned. And so a lot of these cloud solutions give you that agility, that ability to get in, try it, and shut it down if it's not working, so you can contain the risk. You're not left with a whole farm of servers and software. And they tend to be elastic. And what I mean by that is they can grow and shrink rapidly. So do you think that SaaS actually does drive costs down? If I ask one of you, anyone want to answer this question? Does SaaS move into software as a service? Does that drive costs down? I think it does. Why do you think it costs?
Just because the amount of risk that you have locally is much, much lower, especially as far as security. The thing that I use Google Docs for almost everything, and that means that collaboration costs are much, much lower.
Okay.
So there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah. And actually, I do the same, so I definitely, that resonates with me. Who thinks that SaaS increases costs? It's okay, you can put your hand up if you do.
Well, it's an immediate, if you have your in-house solutions already built, you have a cost of moving to it. And I think that's what a lot of companies.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point. Migration cost, the initial startup cost, is definitely one to consider. But I think on whole, I would say that SaaS drives costs down, and worst case, they're a wash. But if you look at the cost of ownership over time, not having hardware, software, firmware, operating systems, necessarily big network investments other than make sure you have enough bandwidth, it will drive costs down if you do apples to apples comparison with on-premise systems. If you have the on-premise systems already there and they're underutilized, that might be a case where a SaaS solution may be more expensive. But the more exciting thing to me is not cost. I'm not an accountant, and actually, every time I ask for technology, I never really look at the cost, but I know from a business point of view, you have to. I'm more interested in the strategic advantages of a SaaS solution. Time to value, I think, is a massive advantage. How quickly could you fire up email, document collaboration, an office system, a sales engine, a marketing engine, a delivery engine, and a call center using SaaS versus on-premise? You can fire it up in weeks, a few months, versus what could be a multi-year project. Has any of you ever worked on a project using technology like SAP? No one? Oh, yes, a number of people. Can you get time to value at this pace? I'm not saying it's a bad technology. I'm just saying time to value at this pace. I'm seeing some they're not nodding up and down. Okay. In terms of scalability, because these solutions are hosted on massively parallel systems, on massively parallel databases and multiple data centers, they will scale quickly. I can scale a Google or say a Salesforce or a Zoho NetSuite solution with a swipe of a credit card. And that's probably most of what I need and a little bit of training for the new users. It's agile. You can modify and tailor how it's used relatively safely. A lot of these systems, you work at the metadata level, so business analysts can make those changes versus developers. And it's mobile. How many of you have got a smartphone here? Every hand's gone up. How many of you have got a Windows smartphone? 3. That's cool. How many of you got BlackBerry? We've got one BlackBerry guy left. That's good. I'd like to see that. What about Android? Yeah, that's popular. And anyone got an iPhone? Or very popular as well. But what you're seeing now is you've actually got a supercomputer in your hand. This has got more processing power now than most computers had in the past. But that's not the first thing. What happens now is most of that process is happening back in the cloud, and this is simply rendering. When you use Google Maps, it hasn't really got everything in here. It knows where you are, and it can render and show you that, and it can do some pretty fancy things. When you do voice recognition, a lot of these devices are actually sending that to the cloud, interpreting it, shooting it back to you. Everyone has almost got a supercomputer in their hands. It's good, isn't it? And then the other thing is some of this integration. These cloud platforms are really brought up in the Web 2.0 area. They will integrate using SOAP, REST APIs. They render data in XML, all open standards. They use middleware tools for batch and near real-time transfer of data. And they are connecting to systems of record at a pace that is unbelievable. A system of record, a mainframe system, an internal SAP or Oracle database. A lot of these systems, it's very hard to get the user interface from that system to your employees, partners, and customers in an engaging way. But they're incredibly powerful as a source of record, a system of record. And what we're seeing a lot now is these SaaS systems are releasing that data and bringing it closer to the point of use. One would argue that cloud computing is environmentally friendly. And they say that because these servers are highly utilized. They're in environmentally designed data centers. And they've got a lower carbon footprint. As you look at that, I don't know I can necessarily buy into that, but it's an interesting thought. The other thing is there's high adoption. A lot of the emerging millennials and new workforce now are very familiar with that web interface. So the adoption becomes a lot easier. I remember the first time I saw a black screen with green text on it. Has anyone ever seen that? And you had to use shortcut keys, and it hovered everywhere, and you thought, what is this? This is like something out of Star Trek. I don't get it. And then as we've come now, you'll see people walking around with their watch, talking, okay, Google, what's the Viking score? You're seeing that system improvement getting closer. And I would contend that cloud systems are actually more secure. Because you look at the security teams and what these cloud-based vendors do for security, and there's very few enterprises that can afford to spend that sort of money. Because when you go to your banks, you're going into the cloud to see how much money you've got. You'll go to your investment or pension company, you're going into the cloud to see your money. Insurance company, going into the cloud. What I'm seeing is, by their nature, these companies harden what they have, and they harden it for everyone. And if you looked at the keynote this morning, the bad people are normally out in front of the good people. So the more security people you're looking after, the better. And audit and compliance. Who likes building their systems to be auditable and compliant? Does anyone in here think that's the most fun thing you get to do? That real value added? It's not. And a lot of these systems are built to cover those standards, so you don't have the burden of it as an IT or business group. And I've talked a little bit about system of engagement. Systems of engagement are really about getting closer to your employees, partners, and customers. Getting your processes closer to them. Engaging them at the business level and really commoditizing some of that technology. So why do you think SaaS could be popular with IT? As someone who sells to IT, SaaS solutions, I can tell you it's not popular. And it's not popular because IT people feel threatened. They feel threatened because they've invested their career in learning SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, .NET, and some of the earlier technologies. And they feel like if this comes into their organization, they're going to get disintermediated and their job might be at risk. But if you look past some of those reasons, you actually find that a lot of IT groups have got a backlog. They can't do things instantly. And if they can get some of these non-critical applications into the cloud, it frees them up to do things that they really are good at. So you can think of it in a positive way. The other thing is if you don't have a capital budget, but you have an operational expense budget, it's another way to get the job done and and delight your business customers. Why is the business like SaaS? Biggest answer I got from business people is because I don't have to use IT shared services. Well, why don't you want to use your IT shared services? They're there they're your servants. They're there for you. Well, they always say they have this thing called the PM no. So every time I ask for something, they say no. And the business says, I've got this business problem I want to solve now. And a lot of these SaaS providers are coming in and saying, you've got the money, you can do it. This technology is simple enough that one of your BAs could get this up. And then, of course, what happens, not desperately well architected, IT's not involved, and then they call IT in to clear out the mess. You've got 25 versions of Salesforce, 48 implementations of Netflix, Workday everywhere. So, and it's because the business see this as an accelerator and they can get around some of the roadblocks internally, they like it. I think it should be everyone's friend, but we're all in a different journey of where we're at. So is there a strategic advantage with SaaS? I would absolutely say, without a doubt, this is probably the best part of software as a service. You can do things that are just not possible with an on-premise model at a speed that is not possible and at a cost footprint that's comparable. What I'd like to do is move quickly on to trends. And some of the trends is, have anyone heard of Internet of Things? Do you know what it is? Still got some, no. It's basically, you're getting combine harvesters, cars. You're getting things connected to the internet. I saw a combine harvester harvesting a field, and I was concerned. There was no one at the wheel. It was being driven with an internet. And you're going to see now the Internet of Things accelerate. Toyota are bringing in, connections where it will actually tell the person to, hey, this is going wrong, and I booked your service at your local Toyota dealer for you. You're going to start to see a lot more of that. BYOD. Anyone got a BYOD policy? Bring your own device at work? One, two. A lot of you people from the enterprise, not mid-market. Yeah, watch the mid-market players. BYOD is really getting inroads there. As I mentioned, there's over 5 billion of these out there now. It might not all be working. I think my Palm Pilot's not, but BYOD is a reality. How many of you have a wearable device? How many of you want one? Well, I've got some hands going up. Early adopters, nice to see 3 of you, excellent. You're now seeing people sitting there, as I say, with their Motorola 360 watch going, text the wife, please tell her I'm going to be late home tonight, and by the way, I'll bring home dinner and some flowers, sorry. And away it goes, and he carries on his journey. Or, or you can say, tell me how to get to this, and it's tapping his wrist so he doesn't have to take his hands off the wheel. And actually, I was used to driving on the wrong side of the road, so that's really useful for me, because I'm not a very good driver, as I think Heather can attest. So, mass personalization, I've talked a little bit about that. And what that really is the ability, once businesses know more about you, to communicate you at a level that's almost spooky. And they can do it on scale, just using technology. I talked a little bit about SaaS integration platforms, where now they're sitting over these system of records, and they are what employees, customers, and partners are seeing. And then mobile. How important is mobile to anyone? Has anyone do mobile apps in their org, in their company? 1, 2. Okay, well, wait for the millennials to talk about mobile for you. I think I've got a little video if it's going to play.
The Salesforce One Lightning App Builder makes it easy for anyone in your company to quickly build engaging apps with point-and-click ease. Now everyone can build apps for every screen size on any device, all from one canvas. Create new apps in seconds using standard, custom, or App Exchange Lightning components. You can drag, drop, and add additional components, then arrange them however you need. And design your app specific to every screen and use case, customizing your app for tablet view, or extending your app for use on a wearable device. Go deeper with Schema Builder to adjust the underlying data model of the app without the need for database administrators and complicated programming. And with Lightning Connect, you can integrate any app with external data sources like SAP or Oracle in just a few clicks. And the data is referenced in real time, not copied, which makes it fully extensible. You can automate your app using the new Lightning Process Builder to create a new order, send update emails or chatter notifications, or submit approval requests based upon in-app triggers to keep the business moving without extra effort. Then, click to activate and instantly deploy on any device across the globe. Now, everyone in your company can have the right apps to solve any business problems. From custom HR apps that ensure employee productivity, to operations apps that modernize legacy processes. And since Lightning App Builder runs on the Salesforce One platform, your apps are always up to date and ready to scale. Go faster than ever before with Lightning App Builder from Salesforce.
Now, is that fact or fiction? It's available now. And this is not the only company that's doing it. And if you're in the enterprise IT or business architecture space, you need to be aware of some of these SaaS development platforms and integration platforms. This creates a fully responsive mobile app that's going after your data and your source of record data and presenting it up in a secure way. And you can create your own app store internally and get the apps to the people that need it. So it's an interesting piece of technology. Was that interesting to see that? It's a bit markety, but as a techie guy, you should have recognized the Schema Builder and the drag and drop WYSIWYG for building the UI. So is SaaS perfect? No. It's got disadvantages. If you are a server hugger, you will not like it. Go and hug your server, your blade, or whatever you've got, your mainframe. Vendor lock-in is a danger. Any SaaS vendor that tells you it's hard to get your data out once you put it in, avoid them like the plague. Your data belongs to you. They can't read your data, but if you can't get it back, you're in a world of pain. The other thing is, if you're not connected to the internet, many of these have minimal offline capability. Some of them have a persistence layer on their mobile capabilities with predefined records that will sync back up when they get a network connection. But in general, if you've got something where people are operating in an area where there's no internet connection, a SaaS solution might not be the best fit for you. And finally, reliability. How many of you build systems to 99.999% uptime? Not many of you got mission-critical systems? Okay. Well, one person over there, thank you. But the reliability of these cloud solutions now is approaching what's possible with on-premise. One would say it's surpassing it. And not only that, there's a lot of visibility. If there's a problem, these SaaS vendors, it's not just a problem with you, it's a problem with all of their subscribers. Trust me, they're going to get on it quickly. So, architects and the business. I think this is where business, enterprise, technical, data, architects, magicians, senior business analysts can now really engage the business in a meaningful conversation. They can be T people, have a broad breadth and a depth, and the ability to execute in a timely fashion. I think SaaS is definitely something that should be considered by architects. It's not going to solve every problem, but more and more capability is now being pushed into the cloud, development environments, mobile capability, APIs, connectivity. It's something I think you should look at. And I would be really intrigued to know How many of you have got a deployment of Workday at your organization? 2. Google? 1. What about Salesforce.com? Oh, about half of you. It's coming. And if it's not coming, it's already there. That's it from me. Any questions? I've kept this pretty high level for you. Question, Heather?
Thank you for keeping it high level, by the way, technology minded. So you mentioned that the implementation costs are low, but the ongoing operational costs are typically higher with software as a service. I'm just curious as to thoughts on that, because it seems like if you had an owned, application, if you will, having people there to develop it, ongoing. So help me understand a little bit.
Actually, it's not higher, it's comparable. Because you're paying each month or each year for using that service. But the good thing is you're not depreciating any assets. You're not rewriting any software. You're not upgrading operating system or infrastructure. So if you look at the total cost of an on-premise versus the total cost of a cloud-based solution, it could be comparable. It's very linear. And unfortunately, when you go to a SaaS, you can't say, no, I'm not doing that project, because you can't turn off email, document collaboration, CRM. So it's a different model. But thank you for the question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Well, since a SaaS is by definition an internet-based service, how do you structure an SLA that involves network providers? How can you hold a SaaS accountable for the internet?
Yeah, you go after that in 2 ways. First of all, you can't hold anyone responsible for the internet, but you can at some point control your connection points to that internet with some higher bandwidth connections. But the SaaS provider will say, if you can get to me, these are my SLAs. This is what I agree to, and I would definitely get them down. Your focus is going to move very closely now to your telecoms and communication providers to get SLAs with them. As you know, there's multiple access points to internet, so you might look for those providers who have some redundancy. So if someone digs up the fiber optic line in Egan, you don't suddenly go out because they have another line coming in from Burnsville or something. So it's really at that time, it's a risk mitigation thing. But I used to have the same conversations about electricity when people started going onto the grid. What happens if it turns off? And now we've got to the point where it turns off so infrequently that we can put some universal power supplies and maybe a generator there, and we've mitigated the risk. And the cost of watts is so much cheaper off the grid that we're not generating our own. And it is that type of game. Any other questions? I know lunch is coming, so... Oh, we have one here. Yeah?
What do you do about, so where it impacts the brand? So if I have data in the cloud and they give me an SLA that says we will protect this with this level of guarantee, yet there's a breach, whose neck do I choke? Because if there's damage to the brand, all the SLAs in the world aren't going to help you, right?
No, this is where you rely on your legal team to get you adequate compensation. I've seen more breaches on on-premise systems, the cloud-based. Not to say that won't change. But what you're seeing out there is a lot of these systems, the cloud-based vendor can't actually read your data. It's encrypted, it's sharded, which if you imagine a pane of glass, they smash it, they put pieces everywhere, and it's only re-rendered so you can see it when it's actually presented at the presentation layer on your device. And so you could argue if you look at on-premise versus cloud, you might be safer in the cloud. But at the end of the day, if there is a breach, if you're on-premise, do you sue yourself?
You don't have yourself to blame.
Exactly. And so with a cloud-based, then you could sue providers and that. And if they're big enough and they have deep enough pockets, you can get some financial compensation, but nothing is completely secure. If you have a computer and it's connected to a network, it's not secure. It's just a matter of, on a scale, how secure it is. I mean, if you put it in a Faraday cage, you generate your own electricity inside it, you have it in a vacuum, you might get pretty close to being secure, but it's unusable, and vice versa. I mean, it's just a matter of, at this point, dealing with business risk. You had a question?
Yeah, I have a comment about this audit and compliance. You mentioned this advantage, and I know that it depends. A lot of those providers will say that they're compliant, and they just put a banner, but if you start digging deeper, they don't even know what it is. And also, because of the follow the sun model, sometimes the data is really striped across the world. You don't even know where it's located. So you have to be really careful because some of the regulations prevent the data cross-border transfer. So this has to be really clearly stated.
And that's actually a very good point. A lot of these organizations are actually independently verified by a third-party auditing company. That means more than then just spraying a bit of cloud spray on their product and a bit of governance and standard spraying. You need to do your due diligence. In terms of data residency, where it is, a lot of the bigger cloud players will say, we can guarantee it's in North America. We can guarantee it's in the United States. We can guarantee it's in Europe. But we can't guarantee which state it's in because they're not going to build a data center in every state. But again, if that's important to your business, I know in healthcare, the data residency and in financial services can be a huge hurdle. But you can get down to some countrywide or continent-wide data residency. As soon as you start saying, I want the data in my data center, you've lost a lot of the benefits of the cloud. And maybe it's not the greatest solution for you. Okay, I've got time for one more question. Or two more questions. Okay, so.
What about the performance, advantages and disadvantages on cloud versus on-premise, right? Especially if we are integrating with, some components on the cloud and some components on the on-premise.
So in terms of the integration play, the SaaS integration platforms now, SIPs, I call them, and generally I think that's what they're being called. They've got all these open integration paths like REST APIs, SOAP APIs, middleware tools that do the extract, transform, and load and batch. They've got all the SAML and single sign-on and identity management in. So now it's actually relatively easy to mash up an on-premise system, another cloud system, and this cloud system. And when you look at the user interface, it actually looks like the same app. It's on the same website. And so I think the integration problem has basically been solved. I think if...
I think data is not solved. You can connect all those devices and they can talk to each other, but the problem happens that they don't really talk the same language.
Right, and that's where the... I agree, Marina, that what we're seeing is a lot of the systems of record, organizations are already putting operational data stores on them, data marts, data warehouses, and they're doing it for the same reason internally as these systems are data silos, and they're all in different forms and different formats. And they put this layer in place so they can report off of it or do BI-type activity or analytics. Well, once that's in place, you can connect your SIPs to that, and you can then use ETL-type tools or programmatic tools to map the data and move it across almost seamlessly and even push data back in. But not all technology lets you do that. I've got 1 minute left. If there's no more questions, you're more than welcome to go to lunch. Who wants to be the last person to ask a question? No one? Excellent. Oh, one question. Yeah?
It's more of a comment. As far as when you're interested in security in a SaaS program, they have the information. They don't offer it up front, but ask them for their recent audits and certifications. case that they do a sale, but they don't offer it up front. But as you review them, you should be reviewing that to find out if they have the serious security built into it.
Well, thank you. Absolutely right. I appreciate it. If any of you have any other questions, you can grab my business card here. I'd be happy to talk to you. I am biased. I love SaaS, and I think it's got a lot to offer. But thank you so much for attending today. Thank you.